There's a skill that nobody ever taught you about reading. I didn't learn it in school. I didn't learn it from my family or friends, but I learned it somewhere in the 52 books I read last year, and I wish I had known this 10 years sooner because it's completely changed my relationship with books and my view of the world. That is a big claim. I'm gonna back it up. And there's a part to this that's kind of funny because I used to never read. I would actually tell people if they recommended a book to me, oh, I don't know how to read. And my older brother, who reads constantly, told me, don't say that because it's bad, which of course made it seem even funnier for me to say. I actually missed a summer in 9th grade because I was so far behind on reading assignments. So once upon a time, normal life for me looked like reading 0 books in a year, most years. And if I can have this big of a shift in my perspective on reading, anyone can. And by the end of this video, you will have one skill framework that I wish I had been handed years ago, the truth about speed reading, and a highlighting method that I built to 10x the value of all the books on my shelf. So why 52 books in a year? My only answer to that is that I was trying to create an impossible goal. I knew that I would have to change a lot in order to do something like this. Something that might sound a lot easier to you. I mean, I know several people who've told me, Cameron, I read 52 books last year, or I read 70 books or 40 books, and they didn't even think about it. It was natural to them. I think there's just something about me that enjoys a good challenge. And a good challenge, I think, is one that offers the opportunity to learn and to grow. Not something that's just hard, but something that will make me more capable. I actually have another YouTube channel almost dedicated to this. And I have people DMing me on Instagram and wherever else asking when I will start posting again. Strangers on the internet, I don't want to let you down. They followed me as I overcame 2 of my biggest fears, heights and fear of the unknown, like if you're swimming in a lake and you can't see what's beneath you. And I became a PPG-2 paramotor pilot, scared of heights, taking off the ground to fly through the sky. And I went scuba diving in an abandoned nuclear missile silo where the only light was the flashlight in my hand. Kind of felt like I was in Luigi's mansion, but 100 feet underwater. Believe it or not, reading was its own version of that. And when I did read, I was slow. I had one speed and it was slower than my speaking voice. But now I can get through a pretty thick book in just a couple of hours, depending on the book. So here's the thing I discovered. Reading is a skill. I mean a specific skill that almost nobody today gets taught. It's a skill of what I would call detecting the meat. And I think that's the ability to recognize how much time and energy you should be giving to a particular sentence, page, chapter, or book based on how much meat is present. Because not all written word is equal. And this is even more profound than I know how to express in a few words. Our brains have been trained to skim. To skim is to glance over something, to keep it shallow, to move across the surface, seeing what's there, but missing what's underneath, not seeing what all is there. To skim is honestly, and the way I would just prefer to define it, it's to stay in the first and second stages of understanding, and to never reach the third and fourth stages of understanding. And I'll explain those stages in just a second, but I need to say that I think this is one of the worst ways I could possibly live. Skimming everything, books, relationships, skimming my work, skimming the years as they go by. When you skim by default, you're choosing to never go deep on anything, whether you're aware of it or not. All of a sudden, this starts to feel like one of the most important videos that I've maybe ever worked on. And I think that's because I'm just so passionate about living life, which has so much to do with me, my perspective, my awareness, my ability to recognize the depth and complexity in the world all around me, and to figure out how to apply myself to it, to take part rather than to simplify the world to the nth degree. So the 4 stages. The opposite of skimming is mulling something over, or I call it chewing on the meat. The best reading I've ever done moves through 4 stages. First, you don't understand it. You're almost reactionary to it. Like you'll make a face, what? What does that mean? What even just happened? This is where everyone starts out on just about anything. With or without the actual reactions, you're in a place where you don't understand in any significant sense what's in front of you. You saw it, you heard it, but a lot was missed. Second stage is you reaching your own understanding from your perspective. Here's my interpretation of what's being said. It's a little bit loose or a bit unsure, but it's still better than just plain confusion. especially better than accepting that you're confused and moving on without doing anything about it. Third stage of understanding is building a bridge. The author is on their island with their whole life and background and perspective. You're on yours, and you do the work to cross over and meet them. And maybe at times you meet them as an equal. You understand what they meant to convey, not just understanding the words for yourself, but understanding the author more and more. And fourth, the ultimate goal, you add to the conversation. You take everything you now understand about their perspective and what they were trying to convey, combine it with your own perspective, and then you contribute something. Maybe even something the author never thought of. I pieced together these 4 stages of understanding and the idea of looking for the meat in life after reading a book called How to Read a Book. It's almost too comprehensive for me to get into here without getting lost in the weeds, but I love this book. And for $20 or less, I'd call it better than a modern college education. I'll put a link in the bio if you want it. Now, the actual reason I was able to read 52 books is speed reading. I said in the beginning of the video that I'm a slow reader and I have one speed. But now I have more than one approach to reading that I can turn to depending on the passage. But I'll be honest, the speed reading book I have was one of the worst books that I read all year. It was helpful and I'm grateful for it and I'm keeping it on my shelf. I guess it just felt like the author's first book and that it was maybe kind of quickly put together. An example is that on the first page of each chapter, he would quote someone famous. Huge names, like chapter 1 was Mark Twain, chapter 2 was Albert Einstein, and then in chapter 5, he quotes himself, which definitely felt kind of goofy. But I owe that goofy book single-handedly for making me capable of doing my impossible challenge, reading those 52 books. With that said, if anyone has a good recommendation for a good speed reading book, please put that in the comments section for me. I would love to look into it. But Cam Knight's speed reading book gave me a great definition for speed reading. He says, it isn't about how fast you move through the text. It's about how fast the facts and ideas are understood. All of a sudden, I'm realizing that many speed readers don't feel the need to literally read every word. And that reframes everything for me with reading. Why am I even reading this book? It's to understand what the author's trying to say. Sometimes that requires reading each word carefully, and sometimes it doesn't. And that loops right back around to the skill that I said earlier about finding the meat. I've discovered that I shouldn't read an email the same way that I read a training manual. To be more specific, he breaks down technical reading as like legal documents, reports, white papers, or anything that you would then have to teach someone else. You carefully chew and digest every line. Then he talks about familiar material, where if you already know the topic or the author or the genre, you can pick up the pace. Then there's reading for pleasure, where you never need to rush, but you also never need to crawl. It's just whatever pace feels good. He then goes into recognizing the relevance of a passage and says that if you're reading just to solve one specific problem, and then you never need it again, you don't have to be so meticulous. The more you actually need, the slower and more attentively you would read. And finally, he distinguishes foundational material by saying that you should always spend extra time on the things that set up everything to come after them. A lot of subjects are cumulative in a way, so the early parts of a book or subject may matter most. And the point of all of that is that pacing should never be one flat speed, like it used to be for me. There's something genuinely more intentional about having speed reading in your back pocket, and I think it's a practice worth learning. Once I found pages or chapters that didn't have a lot of meat on them for me, there are 2 specific techniques that I would use to pick up my pace. The first, and the more foundational of the 2, is called THIEVES. It's an acronym from the National Council of Teachers of English, and it stands for title, headings, introduction, every word in bold, underline, quotes, or italics, visual aids, end of chapter questions, and finally, summary and conclusions. It might sound counterintuitive at first, but if your main goal is to understand what the author is saying quickly, your first step is to skip through the book, hitting all of those letters first. Then when you approach the actual text and you're reading it, you already know the shape of the book. You could be really thorough by hitting on all the letters of thieves before you really start to read the book. Or I know some speed readers who simply give a thorough look at the table of contents before they turn to page 1. And that's all they do. And then when they're reading through it, they kind of hit on the different letters of thieves as they go along, section by section. However you use the Thieves acronym, and I found that it is really helpful, you'll always have these moments where you simply want to read faster. And the technique for this is called space reading. Instead of looking at the words, you look at the spaces between the words. And as you get better, you might eventually be able to glance at a space in the middle of the page and pick up on that entire line. And I never got that good with my peripheral vision, but I'd say that on my best days, depending on the page size, I'd land on 2 to 3 gaps per line, which I found was still way faster than resting my eyes on every single word. Those two techniques, mixed in with my normal slow reading, had me read what I would say is too many books last year. 52 for me is just too many. One of my all-time favorite concepts from a book ever comes from Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. It's called the information-action ratio. It helps me define for myself what it means to be a reader, because I don't think I'll ever read this much again in any future year of my life. The information-action ratio looks at how much of the information you spend time and energy on consuming. It's all the information you take in, right? And it weighs that against how much of that information you can actually take action on, like what's usable. And Postman looks at that through several ages of media going back hundreds of years. And the point is, I had a terrible ratio last year. Yes, I hit my goal. I read 52 books, but I couldn't take action on many of the concepts in most of those books because I was immediately opening the next book. And if you're always picking up and looking at the next thing, you won't ever process and use what you've already consumed. Here's what I really believe now. Reading a lot of books is not a sign of intelligence. It's not impressive on its own. What's actually impressive, what truly distinguishes someone, is finding meaningful ways to apply through action the concepts that you've picked up. That's what would respect the book and the author the most. And it's also what lets the ideas live on through you. And it's what cements them in your mind and in your life. That's exactly the part that I skipped. It also reframes what it means to be a reader. I believe that being a reader has got next to nothing to do with how many books you finish. You could read 1 book a year and be more of a reader than someone who reads 50, because to me, being a reader is about having a deep relationship with reading. Plenty of people read constantly with a shallow relationship to it. It never expands their mind. It never shifts their perspective. It's just another way to pass the time. So much of those 52 books was forgotten. But because of how I read them, I can go back. And the hardest books that took me more than a month to read, I could go back and read in a day or two. Books that took me a week, I could get done in a couple hours. And a book that took me a couple hours, I could reread in 10 minutes. Here's how. It's 3 parts. Part 1, you buy a physical copy of a book. You have it open in front of you with a highlighter in your hand. And for bonus points, you also have an audiobook in your ears to help with pacing and retention. That's not really a speed reading thing, but I do love it. Part 2 is that you highlight more aggressively than anybody is probably used to. The whole purpose is to capture with your highlighter every main concept, so that when you're reading through this the second, the third, the fourth time, your eyes can jump from highlight to highlight and skip everything else. I've got at least 1 book in my lineup that every single page has a highlight on it. I burn through those highlighters. In part 3, at the end of every chapter, before I move on, I pause and I summarize that chapter. That's just a healthy practice, I think, in life in general, which is to not go too fast. The slow game is the fast game, and future you benefits from it. I think it'd be kind of lame if I didn't give you even just one example of what this looks like. So in the speed reading book, I've got highlights that skip 99% of what's on the page. What I highlighted is the eye has the ability to process an image both as a whole and as a collection of individual parts. Skip a paragraph, skip 2 whole pages. Next highlight, this is the essence of speed reading, grabbing text as a whole instead of its individual parts. When doing this, don't analyze, evaluate, or verbalize the words either aloud or in your head. Skip. In the beginning, avoid the need to comprehend what you are reading. Simply focus on developing the habit of looking at the spaces and moving from one space to the next. Skip, next chapter. Now we will talk about chunking. Skip. The key to this technique is not to grab words at random, but to grab combinations that form a phrase. There are so many words on these pages that don't speak to the main point. My highlighter covers the main point all the way through. Just like how at the end of a chapter, I would pause and summarize. When I'm done with a book, I'll go through and find a blank page and summarize the book. This is such a huge book. You might think, like, how do you summarize it? Well, each chapter already has a page worth of summary. So for the entire book, I keep it short. This book paints a valuable picture. It's a pic of how involved you must be, or how difficult or tedious it is to be an intentional communicator, giving or receiving communication. So that summary alone already tells me this isn't a book about reading a book as much as it is about being a communicator. So everyone's experience is different. I wish there were words I could just say to someone that would crack their brain open and change how they see an entire activity, but I haven't found those words. Personally, I just try to stay ready to receive everything good for me and to process everything bad in the best way that I can, because what I care most about is growth. And I really do wish someone had given me a better framework for reading when I was younger. Not this lie that books are split into boring and fun. Boring being self-help and finance and textbooks, and fun being fiction and picture books. That framing makes you miss an enormous amount of value. And I think it's just too easy to decide a whole genre just isn't your thing, when in reality, how much exposure have you had to that genre? And what would it be like if you had the perspective of someone that was a fan of that genre? How is it that they could be such a fan of it? And maybe if you did gain their perspective when it's then blended with your own, you would learn, as a matter of fact, that a certain genre is not for you. My brother, who's a writer, has a hard time with many of the anime that I love because he can't handle exposition. All these characters explaining everything that they're going to do before they do it, he finds it very distracting. And because it goes against everything he's learned through becoming an author, he's not wrong. But I will keep trying to get him to watch Ranking of Kings and Solo Leveling because I want him to like it. But learning is for everyone. Reading is for everyone. Reading has been one of the main ways that people deepen our understanding of the world and multiply our perspectives for a long, long time. And every book from my 52 book challenge asked something different of me. The Story of Earl Nightingale was best listened to. Steal Like an Artist is a simple guidebook. Man's Search for Meaning is meant to be chewed on slowly and applied deeply. Outwitting the Devil takes real self-work just to stop writing the author off as a crazy person and actually getting into his head. Sometimes there's a vast gap between you and the author, and you have to span it before you can honestly weigh the value of what they're saying. Anyway, I'm Cam. I didn't introduce myself before now for some reason. Welcome to the channel, and the best way to support this content is by liking and subscribing. I hope to see you again next week for videos on productivity, finances, and news that you need to know so that you can earn more and do more in your life.